Social Development Minister, Lindiwe Zulu, has told Parliament that the South African Social Security Agency has paid out close to 35 million rand to refugees and about 64 million rand to asylum seekers as part of the Social Relief of Distress Grant. Now, the SRD is meant for South African citizens, refugees, asylum seekers and special permit holders between the ages of 18 and 60 years old. Let's get more information now, and we are joined by SASSA spokesperson Paseka Letsatsi. Mr. Letsatsi, thank you very much for your time. South Africans, listening to those figures, I don't need to tell you that this is an emotive issue for ordinary South Africans who are saying, we live below the bread line, and so how is it that our government can spend so much money on people who are visitors to this country?
Thanks, Toli, for having me on the show. I think at least we are being provided a platform to clarify these matters, because I'm extremely careful. I don't want us to be dragged and end up discussing issues of xenophobia and so forth. I want us to stick to the principles, to the law, and how we have to implement it as an agency. Remember, Toli, and I think this is what me and you must help to talk to the public so that the public understand. And in this case, we're talking about the refugees, we're talking about the asylum seekers, and we are not talking about the illegal immigrants. And I think people tend to confuse them. However, it is the law. We are compelled by the law of the South African Social Security Agency to make sure that we do not discriminate against the refugees or the asylum seekers, because the refugees or asylum seekers have the same right like me and you. The only right which they don't have is the right to vote. So I think it's very much important for me to make that particular background. However, I was also going to appeal to you that these discussions which we are having, me and you now, we need to make sure that I come here with Home Affairs, because Home Affairs are the custodians. If you want to make an application to be a refugee, you go to Home Affairs, and Home Affairs follow certain processes which they have to make sure that they decline or they accept you or they give you the refugee status. When you come to SASSA office, I don't ask you many questions. All that I need to do is to make sure that you comply with the law.
All right. And so these amounts that I've just mentioned, were these the amounts paid out at the end of this financial year?
No, definitely, Toli. I think me and you perhaps can also have the discussions at the end of this financial year in March next year, and then we can then be able to give the statistics, because obviously there will be other refugees basically who come to the country and make the applications and so forth. Yeah. But as we speak now, the numbers which you have given to the public are correct, that in terms of the refugees, 34 million, and in terms of the asylum seekers, it's 63 million that we have paid so far. But I'm saying I'm willing perhaps to put the matter on my diary. Obviously, in the next 3 weeks, it will be it will be a next year. It will be a new year, 2023, and we can then have a conversation. I can then give you the updated numbers and so forth. And I think we can take it from there.
Yeah.
But what we must not forget, Tony, at the back of our mind, because I heard you when you started the conversation, you said South Africans who are watching this in terms of them living below the breadline, what are the statistics saying and so forth. We need to make sure that we educate South Africans so that they understand the differences. You don't just jump the fence, come to South Africa, come here illegally and apply for a grant. You won't get it. You are illegal. The next one said you must be arrested and be taken to Lindela.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want us to then spell out to South Africans. What is the qualifying criteria for a person who is an asylum seeker or is on a permit but is in South Africa legally? So what's the qualifying criteria for that person to have this money extended to them? And also juxtapose that with that of a South African. What is the qualifying criteria for a South African to get this SRD grant?
Let me basically try to say, Oli, there would be a criteria that you must have the South African ID or the permit holder of the refugee status or the asylum seeker. But obviously, if it's about 350, you must not have anything in your account, which you get basically on a monthly basis. Remember, it was 350, then it was increased to 624. And I think once you are part of that criteria, you can then be able to apply. But obviously, you must have those particular documents with you. And the normal social grant, there's a process in terms of us taking you through the means test to check your assets and so forth, and whether you are unable to work or so. And remember, actually, South Africa would then operate differently to other countries where refugees are put in a camp. When they come to South Africa, they stay amongst us as South African citizens. At that point, a refugee might not be having any source of income, and if they don't have a source of income, they can then be able to come to SASSA and make an application. And unfortunately, or if not fortunately, when a refugee or an asylum seeker come to a SASSA office, we don't discriminate on any other thing, as long as the documents that are presented to us are authentic. They've gone to Home Affairs, they give us these documents, we're able to process them. So we don't treat them differently from how we treat South Africans in terms of the income and so forth. They fall within the same category. And I think I did mention, Tony, that, when you make an application or any refugee in this country has got the same rights which you and me have. And it's not about South Africa only, but I think we must just try to clarify that matter. It happens internationally that when you are a refugee, in terms of the United Nations protocol, there are certain rights and benefits which we have. So it's not a South African phenomenon only.
Yeah. All right. So if I understand you correctly, a foreign national who is in South Africa legally, meaning the documents they have prove that they are in the country authentically so or legally so, that's all that they have to present to the SASSA office in order for them to say, I can't get a job and therefore I would like assistance so that I'm able to put bread on the table. What about a South African? What do they need to prove to the SASSA office in order for the SASSA office to say, we understand your circumstance, you do qualify?
No, definitely, if you're a South African, would need your ID just to confirm that indeed you're a South African. But would also want, if it's 350 grant, would also want to check if you're not getting anything coming or flowing into your account, which is above 624 every month. Once we are satisfied with those particular processes, we have to check, in this case, and I think I must emphasize this matter, we also check with other government agencies or government departments if you're not benefiting. Let me just make an example. If you have someone who is benefiting from NSFAS, for example, or UIF, we are able to bounce the information and check if you are not getting any source of income. Because you can't double dip, obviously. And if your name appears on the database of those agencies or departments, then the system will definitely kick you out. But obviously, a South African citizen have the right to make an appeal. But we always encourage South Africans, in fact, we always advise them that if you want to appeal, don't just appeal. Just make sure that if we say you are rejected because you are on the UIF database, make sure that your name is removed from the UIF database first before you come to us. Because if you don't do that, the system will automatically exclude you.
Yeah. You see, it seems quite involved if you are a South African citizen, this process of checks. How do you check if a visitor or a foreign national, but who says, I need help, I've got the correct documents, how do you check that that person is not misrepresenting their issues in front of you in order for them to get this money? Because for all we know, they could be getting some sort of income elsewhere.
No. Thanks for that question, Toli. I think basically the system that we have is such that it's able to pick up. When you sign there, you give us an authority. If you apply for 350, for an example, Toli, you sign, you give us the authority to check your bank accounts, because we know that someone will come to us with bank X and say, this is the banking, this is the account I'm using, only to find out they've opened the account with bank Y, and the money flows into bank Y. So the system which we have, and this system was developed during the lockdown level 5, such that it's able to pick up if there's any source of income flowing to you as a refugee, for example. And obviously, if you are a refugee, I would not expect you to come and give us any. Once you give us an information with the number that has been given to you by Home Affairs, we are able to pick it up if the information that you are giving to us is not correct.
Yeah.
And in that instance, if you make that particular misrepresentation of the facts to us, the system will definitely kick you out. So whatever we apply, it's universal, Toli. If you give us the wrong information, the system will keep you out.
Okay.
I mean to say.
Final question to you, sir. A person listening to this is probably desperate to know whether the SRD is going to continue into the new year. And if so, what is the basic requirement for them to be able to access the money?
Thanks, Toli. I think in terms of the process that we need to implement, we have to implement it until next year in March. That's the authority that is given to SASSA to administer the 350 grant. However, the processes of amending or changing does not belong to us. You remember we are an implementing agency. It is the department which then would have an engagement with National Treasury and the Presidency. And if there's any pronouncement that is made, SNO agency will expect it to be made from those particular engagements. But with us, as we sit, we think that people must basically continue to use the same way, but as we are the information that we have, the 350 is supposed to be administered until the end of March 2023.
All right. And so I take it that people are still receiving their 350 grants?
No, definitely. They are still receiving their 350 as we speak, Tony.
All right. Paseka Letsatsi speaks for the SASSA agency.